Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz bassist and composer Beraket. He was born in Israel, raised in Buenos Aires, and these days he is living in New York City. He spoke about his debut recording as a leader called Obi-Wan. He released this in the summer of 2017. Since moving to New York in 2011, he has performed, recorded, and toured with a wide array of artists all over the world. His approach to improvisation is melded by Mediterranean, South American, and North African folklores, all interpreted through his deep knowledge and appreciation of the American jazz tradition. He's on his way to a great career, and he's doing it right now. So get to know him and dig this interview, my friends.
Thank you for taking a minute out for me today. I appreciate it.
Of course.
So let's go ahead and talk about your latest album, Obi-Wan.
Sure.
How long was this in the making, and how do you feel now that the album's out?
Well, it's my first album as a leader, so it's been in the making a really long time. Most of the music was written during 2015, I guess, 2014, 2015. It was recorded at the end of 2015. It took a while for it to come out, I guess, but balancing all my sideman work with actually preparing this album, mixing, mastering it took some time. So I feel really great now that it's out. I'm looking forward to performing it, touring with it, and also looking forward to having the headspace to writing new music.
So what was the goal with this album? What message did you, what feeling did you want to get across in this album?
It's a really good question. I think I didn't necessarily set out with one goal in mind, but the goal kind of became more apparent during the process of working on it. And I guess if I had to summarize it, it would be I was kind of trying to make sense and to form some cohesive picture or statement from all of my musical roots and influences. I guess you could say that the things that are part of my heritage that come naturally to me. Like over the years, I started noticing that certain things come naturally to me as a player and as a composer. This album was a way of exploring that and finding like a good musical context for that with the band.
So let me talk about the beginnings of your life. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Jerusalem to an Argentinian mother and an Israeli father. Before I could speak or walk, like after a few months, we moved to Buenos Aires, where I spent my early childhood. We lived mostly in Buenos Aires and kind of then back and forth between Buenos Aires and Tel Aviv. And by the time I was going to grade school, we were back in Israel, in a suburb of Tel Aviv, where I spent the rest of my childhood and my early 20s. And then I moved to New York and been there ever since.
So what was it about jazz that pulled you in?
I grew up with it. My father was a big jazz fan. He didn't play an instrument, but I think he should have. Like if he had taken up an instrument earlier in his life, he would have probably been a great musician. He was always playing really good music around the house. I grew up listening to Keith Jarrett, Charlie Parker. He really liked Ben Webster. So it was part of my upbringing. And then my younger brother, Bareket, who's an amazing baritone saxophone player, he started playing when he was 9 years old. So I was 12. He's 3 years younger than me. Well, I started playing a lot later, but in my late teens, I was playing some electric bass. My brother actually really influenced me to take up the upright bass so that we could play together. Like he told me that if I want to play jazz, I need to play the upright bass. So it was kind of, I guess, wanting to play with my brother was a big part of it. It was a pretty simple decision, I mean, now I can, in hindsight, I can rationalize it and say what it was that drew me to it. But at the time, it seemed fun. That music was around, and I wanted to explore it, and I wanted to play with my brother. So,
yeah, that makes sense. You grew up primarily in Israel and Buenos Aires, and then you come to New York City in 2011. Was that a culture shock for you, or was it just a welcoming beacon because of all the jazz and what you were getting into?
It was a little bit of both. I think growing up like bicultural or bilingual is a good preparation for moving to another country in a way. Like you are kind of primed to accept the idea that there are different people who speak, that there are many different ways to go about this thing called life. So I was expecting something different, and there are similarities between Israeli culture and the kind of I wouldn't say American culture by any means, but like the New York culture. I think it's there's something that tends to be like a little more kind of fast-paced, straight to the point, kind of even aggressive sometimes. So that's similar, but on the other hand, there are a lot of differences. Yeah, it took, I would say it took me a few years to get used to the different culture. So it wasn't like a shock, but it was like a gradual adaptation or getting acclimated to Kumanis. But I went to school, which really helped with that. I went to a great school, the new school.
Well, and the one thing, too, I noticed in the same year that you got here, you won first prize at the International Society of Bassist Jazz Competition. How big was that for you to win that award?
For me, that was really big for practical reasons, actually. I mean, a lot of, I don't know who it was that said, like, competitions are for horses, not musicians. Like, was it Bartok or something? Anyway, so, I mean, musicians people like to say that, and to some extent, yeah, I agree. But in this case, I had actually already done one semester at New School in 2010. And after that, I went back to Tel Aviv because I couldn't afford to stay in New York. I mean, there were also other factors at play, but the main reason was financial. I was like, okay, I don't know if I can actually make this work. I had a very generous scholarship, but I still had to pay just the cost of living in New York and all that. And so I went back to Israel just to save some money and figure out what I'm going to do next. And kind of think if I want to try and go back to New York somehow, maybe not go to school. And I signed up for this competition basically as a way to keep my chops up and to stay motivated. Like the scene in Israel is amazing, but obviously it's not as competitive as New York. And I wanted something that would give me a reason to practice. So I signed up for the competition. I sent this recording. Then I found out that I qualified for the semifinals, which means it's actually like flying to, that year it was in San Francisco. It's at a different location every time. So I was able to get this donation from the America-Israel Cultural Foundation just to cover the flight to San Francisco. Basically, winning the competition is what allowed me to come back to New York and finish school. So, long story short, it was a really big deal for me. I was going to say also another way in which it was kind of validating is that I was already like in my mid-20s, and I'm generally I'm kind of a late bloomer when it comes to the upright bass, at least. Like I only started when I was 19. So winning the competition was kind of validating in the sense of like, okay, I can, maybe I'm allowed to play this instrument and like pursue it as a profession. Yeah. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, the one thing that's very clear about your life is that there's been a lot of travel and a lot of different cultures that go into who you are. So that's my question. How key is your history and your sound? How much of these cultures that you've experienced so deeply become the tapestry of the music that you present?
Well, for this album, it's a really big part of it. Some of these cultures I haven't experienced as deeply as I'd like to, and exploring them musically is kind of my way of trying to reconnect with them or to reconcile all of them with each other, because each one of my grandparents is practically from a different continent. Through like lots of immigration and travel, things kind of get lost along the way. So, I have a grandmother who was born in Baghdad. I don't really know a lot about the Iraqi culture, except for the food. Like the food is the only thing that kind of survived the generations of travel and the big cultural change that happened when Arab Jews came to Israel and were kind of trying to fit in and lost a lot of their original culture. I'm trying to explore Iraqi music. Or I have a grandfather, my maternal grandfather was born in Tangier, Morocco. And he actually did show me some more music, and I got some more influence from that. But I wouldn't say that I was steeped in that culture growing up, you know? It's more something that I feel like I have an intuitive attraction to. And this music is a way of exploring that and expressing that.
Let me ask you a generic question. Why do you love jazz?
Okay, I need a minute to not come up with a generic answer, because there's so many great answers. But I mean, I need to ask myself this question every day, you know, because loving jazz and choosing to do it for a living are two very different things. So I really need to be really clear on why I love it. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. You know, so the answer changes every day. I think my answer today is that because there's something about it that can't be replicated or mass-produced, I think as a performer or a listener, it keeps you in touch with a certain aspect of humanity that to me is sacred, in a way. That's kind of a big word, but you know, it's something that you can't really capture. It just takes being in a moment and listening, and that moment is fleeting, and it can never repeat, because every performance is a different thing. That kind of intimacy that you get between performers and listeners, to me, doesn't exist in other musical genres, really.
I like that answer. That's a great answer. So let me ask you this. I kind of want to get to the essence of who you are as not only a musician, but as a human. And I want to ask you this. Everyone has a perception of who you are, your family, your friends, your fans. But who do you think you are? When you face the day, what is your perception of who you are in the world?
Wow, that's a really big question. I'm still finding out. I think I'm too young to answer this question. I'm really I know the question to that on maybe on an intuitive level, on an experiential level, or on a functional level. I know how I function in different situations and what I'm trying to do. So, you know, I think I know who I am as a bass player, as an artist. I hope I know who I am as a friend, as a sibling, as a son, as a partner. You know, I know who I am in relation to something. But just as an isolated question, I don't know. That's a really good question to think about for a while, actually.
Yeah, sure, it is. It's a big one. But I think you answered it. I think you got to the essence of what I was looking for, and I appreciate you taking some time out today to talk to me about the new album and opening up about your life. It's a very interesting one. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the world like Israel, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Or for his time, his music, and his stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.